Welcome to the Four Visions Market Podcast, a space built on the principles of integrity and reciprocity. Together, we will engage in thought-provoking conversations about plant medicines, why these plants are coming out of the rainforests, jungles, and mountains after thousands of years, and what it means to be in right relationship with the ancestral wisdom cultures and guardians of these traditions. I'm your host, Mariah, founder and director of Four Visions Market. This podcast is the natural evolution in our commitment to providing you, our tribe, with incredible resources to support you on your healing journey through plant medicines. Welcome home. Welcome back, Four Visions Tribe, for another wonderful episode of the Four Visions podcast. Today on the show, I am thrilled to be joined by Lorna Liana. Lorna is the CEO of EntheoNation, a media company covering psychedelics, ancestral plant medicines, and global medicine culture. She is also the founder of the Plant Spirit School, an online school offering workshops, programs, and one-to-one mentoring to individuals and professionals in the psychedelic sector. The Plant Spirit School Integration Coach Certification Program is designed to help plant medicine practitioners become thriving integration coaches in the psychedelic renaissance. Her latest venture, Plant Spirit Journeys, offers community-oriented, culture-based plant medicine healing retreats in collaboration with indigenous wisdom keepers. Plant Spirit Journeys are designed to support integration professionals in cultivating their entheogenic skills so that they may rise as leaders of the Renaissance. So thank you, Lorna, for joining us. It's a pleasure to connect. I'm very excited for today's conversation. So just want to give you a warm welcome to the podcast and to the Four Visions community. And I would love to start by asking you, what is your life purpose and mission? What are you here on this earth to accomplish?
Wow. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And I'm so deeply honored to be here. And yeah, the whole question of purpose really goes back to the work that I've been doing with the sacred medicines, specifically with ayahuasca. There was a time where I was really trying to clarify what my purpose was going to be. And I found myself in the Brazilian Amazon in a boat wedged between sacks of concrete, beans, and rice with a gentleman from North America who was part of the Pachamama Alliance. And he had this card that he pulled out. And on one side of the card, it was the Pachamama Alliance vision. And on the other side of the card was his personal purpose. So the Pachamama vision is an environmentally sustainable, socially just, and spiritually fulfilling human presence on this planet. That's been a vision that has really been one that I've held deep in my heart. I feel like it is so complete. I don't feel like there is much of a need to modify that. Pachamama Alliance did a wonderful job with creating that vision. But then when I started to wonder, well, gosh, what is my mission? What's my purpose? And we were actually on our way to the Santo Daime community of Seu de Mapia. And it was like an 8-hour journey by boat at this time. This was before they actually created the road. Before they built the road, you could only get there by boat, and it was like 8 to 10 hours. And so I'm on my way there, and I'm just in this deep inquiry. And it was during a 4-month period of time that I was actually in the Amazon, spending time in this community, spending time with the Kuna Queen, traveling to their villages. And so I would say, with all of the medicine drinking that I was doing, my spiritual channels got so opened up so that I started to really hear the voice of the forest. And listening to the voice of the forest also was supported by some of the shamanic work we were doing at the Center of Forest Medicines in Mapia that was led by Madrinha Maria Lisi and her team. And we were doing this work around, using plant medicine essences to be able to activate certain, attributes, certain skills and gifts. And so in this work, I started to receive this message from the forest around me saying, Lorna, your mission, should you choose to accept, is to leverage emerging technologies to preserve indigenous wisdom so that ancient wisdom can benefit the modern world and technology can benefit indigenous people. Now, I will say that the second part of that mission came later when I was challenged by a friend of mine on this path. She was like, well, what is this going to do for indigenous people? Right. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And so it's just been this deep inquiry on, how it might be possible to be able to bridge the benefits of technology that we have right now in order to share their message, to share their culture in ways that benefit them. And I hope one day, to even deepen that work in ways that are much more impactful and powerful, like some of the social ventures that I'm aware of that are doing incredible work with, mobile technology and drones for like vigilance in indigenous territories. There's some really powerful technology innovations that are helping indigenous people. So that's my long-term vision, to keep exploring what that means. But right now, in this moment, I do a lot of work with social media, new media, essentially around sharing culture, sharing information, education about the safe, responsible, high integrity use of ancestral medicines, especially as the use of these ancestral medicines is expanding around the world with the psychedelic renaissance, and how we might be able to use these medicines, but also remember the value of respecting indigenous traditions and cultures, and honoring the indigenous wisdom keepers that have been their historical stewards.
Taking a short break from today's episode to share about an incredible product line that we absolutely love. It's called Clarea, which means clarity and illumination. Clarea was created from divine inspiration and guidance that our coherence of body, mind, and soul are born from inner clarity. These creations are alchemized with the intention to bring forth health and well-being to the totality of your temple, to nourish a vital, thriving life. Holistically handcrafted with love and care for your well-being of mind, body, and soul. An offering that is life-giving, relevant, and aligned for all life and the future generations to come. Clarea is formulated from over 33 years of the founders' combined in-depth, dedicated study, research, application, and experience with holistic health, Ayurveda, herbalism, permaculture, detoxification methodology, and healing. Everything is 100% organic or wild-crafted, biodynamic, homegrown, vegan, botanical, pure, all ingredients of the purest, highest grade, sourced ethically and sustainably. Clarea is a full-circle sustainable project that aims to create as big as an impact for our Mother Earth and all life as possible. We are 100% aligned on every level with this beautiful company's mission, and for that reason, we felt called to share this incredible product line with you, our Four Visions family. 10% of all proceeds go directly to nonprofit organizations aimed at environmental regeneration and restorative efforts, specifically for water cleanup, protection and preservation of the waters, restoration of bee populations, protection of indigenous sacred lands, rights, and natural resources, reforestation, and endangered species and animal rights. Check out the link in the show notes and make sure to use the code FVFamily to snag some savings on your order. And now back to today's episode. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do feel a lot of parallels to the journeys that we are both on. And so it's wonderful to hear a little bit more about your why and your driving force and where that comes from. this study of really being in service to ancestral wisdom traditions and choosing to be a bridge, as well as committing to amplifying ancestral traditions and indigenous lineage keepers, is that very much that a study. It requires a continued dedication and commitment to listening, to really opening, to be willing to hear what the needs, goals, and desires of the communities that we are both in partnership with want, rather than coming at it from this lens of saviorism or thinking that we know what they should want. And I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit about what your process has been and your learning process of amplification, and how you have gone integrating these teachings throughout your journey, and how perhaps it has laid a foundation for the platform that you have created.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, there's so many nuances and facets around what this work actually entails. I think for myself personally, um, it has involved spending a lot of time with Indigenous communities, as a visitor, a guest in their home. Um, Eating the same food, hearing their stories, seeing, experiencing how they live their lives, understanding what their needs are, what their challenges are, right? It's hard to really know these things unless you're there living it with them. And I think that's where like the authentic friendship really starts,
Mhm,
right? Because then it's not like, this concept around saviorism or must, do this for them, in order to m- make sure that our company has a social, responsibility program, right? It's
mhm,
kind of like, a lot of it is going to involve like actually having relationships, ongoing relationships with Indigenous people.
mhm,
And sometimes it looks like, sitting in ceremonies with them like years over years, walking with them, like, years over years, and I will say that, like, there are people that I know that walk more, much more closely with some of the indigenous, wisdom keepers that I know, and, that's something that's really beautiful to witness. I feel like, my work has been, largely at the intersection of, yeah, the West and what's happening with the psychedelic
mhm,
renaissance, and, one of the challenges being that because the psychedelic renaissance is changing and expanding so quickly, a lot of the conversation that's being had is in English. And so
mhm,
how is it possible to be able to make sure that, indigenous perspectives make it to the negotiating table?
mhm,
And so, what I can do, is try in whatever way I can to ensure that, if I'm hosting an online conference, that we might be able to share their thoughts and perspectives. And sometimes that looks like having interviews with Indigenous wisdom keepers and then having to translate them. So having an interpreter there, so that they could be understood, or, having somebody that, puts that creates the English subtitles so that people can understand what they're saying. And all of these things are, additional effort, additional labor, and resources to be able to do. But I think it's important to be able to do these things. If I have an ability to secure speaking spots in another conference, then I will try to do that as well.
mhm,
Yeah, so, that's predominantly my capacity. I don't have the ability to travel around with them and support them in ceremonies like some of my friends are able to, and that's, very different work as well. But I think there's always, so much more to do, There's also, being able to support their communities financially, because the Brazilian government is falling short of their commitment to supporting the indigenous and providing for their basic needs, from, healthcare to clean water to education. The indigenous are
mhm,
having to pay for that themselves, and
mhm,
often they have to rely on the support of their allies in the global north to be able to pay for these things. And, that's important as well.
Those are all really important things to mention, and I'm so that happy that you brought all of those points to this conversation. Wow, ultimately, I really respect, the position that you have taken, and I've done both. I've spent over a decade translating and traveling with my teacher all over the world, and now I'm in this very similar chapter to you, where I'm more grounded, raising my child, and really having to nurture this community for visions and being more here in this space. And I have come to a lot of the same observations that you just named, especially with this growing industry, for lack of a better word, and the necessary precautions that we all need to have at the forefront of our awareness as plant medicine pathwalkers who are potentially going to benefit from some of the legislation and the political changes that are happening in our country and in North America, and in the West as a whole. And it's a very interesting time that we're living in. And I really do think that over the next 10 to 15 years, the amount of change that we're going to see from this globalization of plant medicine, both in our political climate and our legal climate, as well as just in our society's approach to psychotherapy, healing, and alternative healing practices becoming more and more accessible and integrated into our society. These are real questions that we have to really, cultivate and put at the forefront of our own studies. If anyone is working with plant medicines, a lot of the points that you just mentioned, I believe to be fundamental when it comes to walking in right relationship with the plants, is being in right relationship with the traditional stewards, the original carriers. And so it's, you know, requires this consistent investigation and really dedication. And so I really appreciate that is, where you're coming from with it, because just hearing that, if you go book a conference, like, this is also how I think. If I go book a conference for myself, like, I want to have my teacher there too, speaking as well, because I feel like it's important that we are able to open up those channels and those avenues. And even this element of the translation, that's something simple that people don't really take into consideration, but it's one of the biggest challenges that anyone who works with bridging cultures and is doing similar work to what we're both doing has to deal with on a daily basis. I can't tell you how much heat I've gotten over the past of, not having more direct either video clips or media of wisdom keepers sharing about the tools that they're sourcing to us. And it's often overlooked the amount of logistical coordination that comes with being able to capture these messages and bring them to the West, translate them, put subtitles on them, coordinate with a lot of these wisdom keepers who are living without internet or in very rural communities, and they don't have access to high quality camera. There's so many little intricacies to the work that we do. And I love that came through, because it's like, we are solution oriented. We're always looking to find ways to be that bridge. But I love that was named, because I do feel like it's an important thing that everyone has awareness in, and it could also be utilized to make decisions on how we're going to go about bridging wisdom cultures into the political landscape, into decision-making processes, recognizing that 100% it is needed. And number two, it is going to require more effort than just, having English speakers at a conference, but going that extra step and making that extra effort, I believe to be crucial to the insurance of this path that we're going down as a modern society. I am very hopeful. I feel that there's a lot of beauty to come in the next years, as we continue to see this unfolding landscape of the term that you use, the psychedelic renaissance. For me, I do believe that there needs to be some shifts in the current ways in which the decision making processes are taking place. And you really named it there, like, they're to be developing policies, to be developing concepts like psychedelic assisted therapy without bringing in the conversation of what it looks like to incorporate and honor and have the traditional wisdom cultures represented. To me, it feels like that path has no foundation. And so I firmly believe in the importance of opening that door. And I do feel like it's going to start to happen more and more over the coming years with people like you and I, platforms like ours that are really dedicated to ensuring that that takes place. That being said, could you talk about potentially some of the dangers that lie ahead if we don't do this?
I mean, goodness, there's so many angles to look at this, right? But I think like the one thing that really comes to my mind, right, is, how exactly do you make that bridge? So when you think about a drug development company that is potentially, that's developing the world's first ayahuasca pill, right? And, you know, like how would a company like that give back? And to whom exactly? Because there are a multitude of communities in the Amazon that for which ayahuasca is a sacred medicine and part of their origin stories, right? So like how exactly, like practically speaking, does a company that has stands to really profit from the development of novel therapies based on ancestral medicines, how do does a company like that continue to support indigenous sovereignty, right? And which indigenous group, right? And it was interesting because I was looking at the website of that company that developed the world's first ayahuasca pill. And they had a sacred, like a corporate social responsibility program where they were going to, dedicate I think, percentage of proceeds to the native peoples of Canada. And I'm just like, but the native peoples of Canada are not the ancestral wisdom keepers of ayahuasca. So, I understand that, there's this whole thing around like land, like, land acknowledgements and, wanting to be able to give back to indigenous communities that, live in the area in which the company is doing business and has the base of their economic activities, but they're not
There needs to
Amazon.
be both. It
Yeah, I think
really,
there's like,
yeah.
which, the yeah, exactly. Like, which indigenous are we talking about, should be included in that program. So yeah, yes, it's a big conversation. Um, so I think there's a risk of basically, whitewashing effectively. It's like it's colonial. It's colonial extractivism. It's a different face of an old story. It's a different version of an old story where there are medicinal resources from other parts of the world that, Western companies are exploiting, that, and the economic benefits are not flowing back to the people that shared this knowledge, that shared these medicines. So how do we make sure that there's some type of equity, right? And then I think, another thing too that I'm witnessing, and it's being discussed, quite a lot actually, it's the fact that these days there are more non-indigenous ayahuasca drinkers and non-indigenous ayahuasca facilitators than there are indigenous. And so when you think about a lot of the ceremonies that are happening and the resources, the abundance that's flowing around from these types of activities, retreats, they're predominantly catering to an affluent, mostly white, North uh, North American, European market, right? So there's this whole economic sector that's growing, that's, predominantly benefiting people that are not indigenous. So how do we actually, also make sure that there isn't this like growing inequity around who is perceived as more trustworthy, more knowledgeable, more competent, somebody that's got a medical degree, that's somebody that has a PhD or a, degree in psychotherapy is being perceived as being, you know, more safe and qualified than somebody who might be indigenous and a wisdom keeper, but who never went to college. So there's that aspect as well. Like that is, feeding into the, growing inequity, just imbalance of power, so to speak, around the flow of economic benefits.
Those are all really important points, and I also feel like this element of really just looking at who is drinking medicine and asking the question, how does the globalization of plant medicine continue forward in a direction that is benefiting all of humanity? And I think that that is really the question at the forefront of my work, because I'm very much aware of this element of many of the traditional tribes who, for whom ayahuasca has been their sacred plant. Many of the youth have never experienced ayahuasca. They, don't take part in their traditional cultures. There's a huge risk of loss of language and the traditional practices of their people, because the youth are not, for the last 30, 40 years, have been pulled more and more towards the desire essentially to meet Western expectations of success. So, what was happening in a lot of indigenous communities is that the youth are leaving and going to seek Western forms of education, going to college or getting types of degrees, because there has been an indoctrination to believe that that is of greater value than the preservation of their traditions. And so, that being said, I have seen over the last 5 years or so a shift, and I am happy to say that I believe this shift is also the result of a greater interest in ancestral-based healing that is taking place because of globalization. So, in my opinion, the globalization of plant medicine is very much a good thing, when done well and when done in reverence and respect. And, this opinion comes from my studies with the traditional indigenous partners that I have had the blessing to cultivate relationships with for many, many years. And everyone, all of our team who sends us these medicines and that we get to share these tools with our community, they all believe this, right? They all believe that these medicines are for all of humanity, and that these medicines are coming out of the jungle to support in the healing and evolution of the planet and the collective consciousness. And I really do believe this. I believe that these are tools that can radically transform the planet, and can be also an avenue in this mutual benefit cultural sharing model that can in turn help the indigenous communities resurrect their traditions and cultures. And so I've already seen it happening, and it's really beautiful to watch these tribes that have chosen to come out and share more be able to further their own projects, infrastructure development, language schools, cultural reclamation projects, and ultimately it's coming from them. They're spearheading it. And it's with this beautiful reciprocity that's taking place. Of course, this isn't across the board. And of course, this needs to happen more. But I do feel like if we're talking about the benefits, that is the ultimate benefit, that there's potential for this to help heal all of humanity, and there's potential for this to be a supportive, motivating, catalytic energy to preserve ancestral wisdom cultures. And so that's my perspective, and I would love to hear yours and how you perceive the globalization of plant medicine at this time.
Yeah, so what you just shared with me brings me back to a moment where it was in 2004 that I was traveling by boat, um, by plane and by boat, but it was a lot by boat to the Hunter Queen communities of Upper Jordan. And I was traveling with a documentary film team. I was actually with Chai Fernando before he started to develop his music and become part of Kurawaka and also Amazon Ensemble. But in this trip, they actually recorded a lot of jungle recordings that you hear in their first album, Amazon Ensemble's album My Inini, that was recorded during this 2004 journey. And we'd stopped along this village, and there was a woman in the village that had the most incredible um, weavings. And it was, explained to us that she was the one woman that had the knowledge of how to be able to weave these textiles with all of the different sacred geometry, which they called kana. And so she was actually instrumental in teaching all of these other women on how to weave these textiles. And literally, this art almost died if it was not for her and this intention to teach more women to weave this way. And now, when I go back to Brazil, there's just this flourishing of the arts and textiles, like, that I've actually witnessed evolve over the years. The beadwork has gotten better, like, more creative, there's a lot of you can see that there's a lot of exchange in, knowledge around the artistic styles and how to do things, not just among the different communities in Brazil, but also, like, with Colombian, like, artisanias. And, I'll see, like, distinctly Colombian styles that have just been integrated in some of the Brazilian handcrafts. It's like,
Mm.
wow, this is some cross-cultural exchange here. Also, just like the music. The music has completely evolved, and it's just been
Mhm.
beautiful to witness. I remember being in the Yawanawa Festival in 2011, and I was doing a lot of media recording even back then. I think, like, some of the videos that I shot, in that festival are the first appearances of some of the Chais, some of the indigenous, who now have albums. But I remember following them around and, asking permission to record them singing. And I, also, posted some of the videos on YouTube. And that was the first time that they had, been online. Now they all have, like, Spotify channels, and, they're all on Facebook, and they've got albums out, and some of these songs have been played over and over again by people that are trying to learn how to sing the song. So seeing the flourishing of the music and the evolution of their ancestral chants to being to songs that are being played with guitar that could qualify, as, like, international folk music, like, in, like, the modern, like, in, like, the contemporary music marketplace, right? Like, where they're emerging artists that are coming out that are incredibly talented, and people are learning their songs all around the world. These are things that are just really beautiful to witness, and I love to be able to tell stories about the indigenous cultural renaissance and to be able to share those stories in, the mini documentaries that I've been able to produce about these topics.
Taking a quick break from today's conversation to share with you a short message, let's talk about plant medicine integration. Integration work is the action taking and the grounding into the fibers of our beings, the ancestral and cosmic wisdom that the plants give us. It is the manifestation of every vision. When we do it well, it becomes the true ceremony, the ceremony of life. The 4 Visions Plant Medicine Integration Program was created to support you in learning how to cultivate the unique process of translating the healing and wisdom received from the plants into your daily life. Our personalized, self-paced learning platform was developed to suit each person's unique availability and commitment levels, with as much hands-on guidance and support or autonomy as you are needing and wanting. Our in-depth curriculum is comprised of a robust digital content series, live monthly workshops, private spiritual consultations, and community connection. Our faculty is made up of renowned spiritual teachers, indigenous wisdom keepers, and integration specialists, each with unique backgrounds and decades working with the plants. We created the curriculum we wish we had had years ago when beginning our plant medicine journeys. Some of the topics we cover throughout the program are immediate integration basics, cultivating your spiritual practice, building a Plant Allies toolkit, how to make spiritual payments, how to deepen your connection with plants, working with Hape, Sananga, and cacao as allies, the foundations of microdosing, the art of forgiveness and reconciliation, spiritual hygiene, and plant diets. If you feel called to cultivate your integration practice or are interested in nourishing your spiritual studies and deepening your relationship with plants through a one-of-a-kind transformational container, we welcome you to visit fourvisionsintegration.com to learn more and sign up. And now back to today's show. Beautiful examples, and it's such a wonderful reminder that everything changes. Everything always is changing, and change is good. Change is beautiful. That it's how we evolve and grow and continue deepening in the study. And I'm sure for some of the Brazilian tribes, it's similar to the Colombian tribes that I work with. But for the Inga, originally the chants and the icaros were just through the voice. There was no other instrument, and the first instrument that was incorporated were the bamboo flutes and the wind instruments that they made through material that was being grown in the jungle. But then in the 1800s, the harmonica was introduced, and this was brought over through the conquistadors and the colonists who brought these instruments from Europe. But then it ended up being woven into a core element of the healing ceremony of the Yahe. And then later on, very much more recently, in the late 1900s, the guitar was introduced. And so it's beautiful to watch this evolution and to see way in which the music and the art and all of the practices can actually be fed by this element of cultural exchange, and the ways in which this desire to grow, this desire to learn and receive is actually something that can feed a tradition. When we get so attached to preserving things exactly the way that they are, we lose sight of the potential, of the possibilities, and all the beauty that can be created when we open and really attune ourselves to this gift of sharing and this gift of learning. And I feel that many of the indigenous communities are being really exemplary models of what that a process of evolution looks like. And even on a more grounded level too, with their desires to integrate modern comforts into the depths of the jungle. Many of the communities, they want infrastructure, they want electricity, they want internet, solar panels. They need to obviously develop better water harvesting modalities, because so much of their water has been polluted. And so there's this drive to incorporate technology into the communities to provide more opportunity for these traditional ways to be preserved and also improved, and so that the lifestyle can be improved while living in harmony with nature. And so I do feel that these ways and the ways in which the tribes are interacting with the modern culture at this time is something that we as Western society can learn a lot from when it comes to what's taking place in the West. As as you mentioned, this tendency of extrapolation and appropriation and really just taking, which is the Western mindset in many ways, is very much at play when we talk about plant medicine culture in the West and everything that's taking place with the growing industry that we are witnessing and seeing unfold. And so this kind of leads me to my other part of this conversation where I would love to talk with you a little bit about this element of integration, this element of the role that we play as Westerners who are receiving these healing modalities and having the blessing to be part of these traditions and medicines, and really to get into where the vision for this plant spirit school started, and why this felt like an important complement to the work that you are offering into the world.
In my travels and in my experience of sitting in, a wide variety of different plant medicine ceremonies, predominantly ayahuasca, I start to notice something that I felt was an unmet need. And that is that in many different plant medicine communities, there isn't the practice of offering integration support to the people coming to the ceremonies, or, if it's a retreat, for example, there's no ongoing integration support for people from the West, especially who are coming to a plant medicine retreat. And here's the thing, right? Like this whole concept of psychedelic integration is something that really emerged in, Western psychedelic psychotherapy, right?
Mhm.
It was kind of it was a concept that was developed, in by Western psychotherapists, around the need or the benefits of being able to integrate the wisdom and insight from a psychedelic journey into one's day-to-day life, right? Now, when you think about the way that ancestral medicines are being used, ancestral medicines are part of indigenous culture, part of their lives. There is no need for integration because everything's already integrated. They may drink medicine when they're feeling a need to drink medicine in order to gain spiritual insight, in order to heal oneself. Maybe there's some, community-wide celebration related to the harvest or, seasons, or maybe there's a big political meeting that's happening and, everyone needs to get on the same page. So you drink ayahuasca first, and then, you can have like a more, expansive, heart-centered conversation around needs and wants politically, right? So, there if you're living in a community that's integrated with nature, then you don't have to go into nature to integrate. Like it's already a part of you, right? It's part of where you live. It's a culture that is much more, oriented towards dreaming, and like, non-linear way of like, understanding phenomena. It's not so logic based, right? Um, so the need for integration really kind of comes to the forefront when you look at Westerners using plant medicines and psychedelics. And so I think, one of the things that I started to notice is that, a lot of plant medicine practitioners were not receiving a lot of the education around harm reduction and trauma awareness that a lot of the psychedelic therapists were receiving in their education, because they are participating in plant medicine ceremonies in a lineage based container, or as part of an entheogenic church. And so a lot of these containers are a lot more faith based, belief based, tradition based, right? So it's not, these psychotherapeutic models are just not a part of it. But I think they're also really important to start to bring into these spaces, because there is a lack of awareness of how to work with somebody that might be experiencing past trauma that has been unhealed, that has been brought up for, healing, brought back into awareness as a result of working with these medicines. And, without that kind of education and that care, it's possible to, inadvertently re-traumatize a person and actually leave them worse off than before they actually, joined the ceremony. And so I think, that type of awareness and knowledge is essential. It's not something that's going to spontaneously emerge in your consciousness. It's really, best practices that are passed down from human to human. And I think it's important for plant medicine people to start to deepen their knowledge and awareness around, um, yeah, around harm reduction, around drug and medical contraindications. Westerners are a highly prescribed um, group of people, right? And the indigenous have, they're not aware of all of the different pharmaceutical medications that Westerners might be prescribed and how they
Mhm.
might interact with ancestral medicines. So having somebody who is a bridge be the one that is conducting the intake, interviews is essential. Having, people like you, people like myself, who are more aware of Western pathologies and, Western drug dependencies, drug prescriptions is essential because the indigenous are not going to be able to do that type of medical screening or intake because it's not a part of their culture.
Yeah, I mean those illnesses, a lot of the illnesses that we have in our culture, they just didn't exist in the traditional communities, and it's been very interesting for me over the last 10 years of working with my teacher Taito Juanito, because he is someone who is always curious to learn, and he's told me many times. I'm treating illnesses that I never treated when I was back in the village. Like, this is incredibly interesting to me because I am passionate about healing the human psyche, but I'm recognizing that the Western psyche is different than the indigenous psyche. And so, with that understanding, the need for proper training and comprehension of how we go merging these two very different worlds and traditions becomes vital. And this is also, what led For Visions to establish our first integration program and the container that we offer to people. And I think that it was probably a very similar process for you in creating your coaching certification, wanting to train people on how to become proper plant medicine integration specialists. Could you share with us a little bit about your program and how you designed it and why it came forth in the way that it did?
Yes, absolutely. So I felt that there was a need for a multidisciplinary program that integrated um, Western therapeutic understanding of psychedelic healing, integration, harm reduction, with cultural awareness around ancestral medicines, some of the most commonly encountered ancestral medicines um, that are available, right? So, primarily ayahuasca, psilocybin, and we do touch upon a little bit about wachuma, but, um, not as deeply as the two others. And so it's these two aspects that we felt was important to include in a training program specifically designed for plant medicine people that are participating in global medicine culture. So
Mhm.
if you notice around the world is a discernible phenomena that one might coin as, medicine culture. And, the epitome of medicine culture might be Medicine Festival in the UK that takes place in August, right? Which is like this celebration of indigenous culture and songs. I mean, it's basically like, a celebration of plant medicine culture, but without the plant medicines at the festival. But the Yawanawa are there, and I believe some of the other indigenous Huna Queen, Shipibo, yeah, it's just there's psychedelic you know, panel discussions as well. So I think that, we're witnessing this global phenomenon and there are medicine songs that are being sung around the world. Some of those songs are indigenous songs. There are, yeah, there's different ways in which the ceremonies are being held, right? And and I think like, these days there's going to be more people having their first experience with psychedelics, like with ancestral medicines at a ceremony, at a plant medicine ceremony than, for example, in a ketamine clinic, right? So of course, there's like, the festival, mushroom trippers and people that, will have psychedelic experiences, from a recreational standpoint. But when it comes to like having a healing experience, like an intentional healing and guided or facilitated experience, a lot of people are having those experiences in plant medicine ceremonies near them that are, neo-shamanic in flavor, for example. And so that's why I think a program that helps educate this demographic of people was essential. And another aspect of the program that we focus on is, how is it possible to develop an integration coaching business? Because integration is, in a way, integration support, integration coaching is, in a way, a form of life coaching, but with, entheogenic awareness. And to be able to cultivate that as a coaching modality or as a coaching practice, it's something that we wish to support our students in being able to do in a effective and empowering way that moves them forward in their vocations in the psychedelic renaissance.
Beautiful and so needed. And a lot of people are surprised to find out that a lot of psychedelic assisted therapies, in order to become certified to be able to offer them, some states have very little to no requirements that there is actual direct experience from the therapist with these plant medicines to be able to provide and hold this container and space, which is something that's very concerning to me. And in the the neo-shamanic world, like you were mentioning, there's also this concern that there are many people whose first encounter with plant medicine is being done in this format of ceremony that has no direct lineage, and their first medicine experience is being facilitated by someone who calls themselves a shaman, has calls themselves initiated, but there's really no checks and balances put into place with that process. And so for me, I believe that programs like what you are offering are essential for raising awareness about a level of standard and ethics that are going to very much need to be addressed in the next few years. If we don't address them, this psychedelic renaissance, I'll just keep using the word that you are using, will fail. I really do believe that the need for ethical agreements to be made and awareness to be brought into the many different facets of how we're approaching plant medicine use in our society is vital to its success. And so I think that over the next 10 years, what we're going to start seeing is this current model of psychedelic assisted therapy, of all of these plant medicine ceremonies happening all over the place, is going to potentially either blow up or come to that boiling point where there's going to be an agreement or an awareness on a certain level within the greater plant medicine community that some changes need to take place. And so programs like what you're offering, our plant medicine integration program, which is direct to people who are needing to integrate, these are programs that help to educate about what it looks like to work with these plants in a good way. I think there's also a pitfall because a lot of companies, platforms, and circles talk about working with them in a good way, utilize that terminology of even claiming sacred reciprocity or claiming that they are a supportive container. But the reality is there hasn't been a baseline established of what a supportive container and follow up and protocol beforehand really looks like, right? So we're in this really unique time where, plant medicine is all over the place, psychedelics are all over the place. And that needs to happen in order for us to get to this place of really starting to ask some of the deeper questions. But I feel like these offerings are, groundbreaking in a lot of ways because they are kind of opening that pathway, which I believe is going to get to be come to a point where there's no other way. If we're going to move forward, it has to be this way. And my prayer is that that can happen sooner than later, before things fall apart, before we see concerns and real dangers to the progress that we've made as a society in terms of our acceptance of alternative paths of healing. And so this is a conversation that gets me really excited because it really is the driving force behind why I'm in this world and the work that I have committed myself to do. Because ultimately, we're talking about legacy here. We're talking about what this world is going to look like and how we're going to relate with nature and the ancestral wisdom of plants 50, 60, 100 years from now, 300 years from now. We're in this extremely pivotal time where the decisions that we make, the consciousness that we choose to take on and direct towards a lot of these bigger decisions that we are making as a community and as a society are going to affect many generations to come. And so for me, it's a beautiful thing to be sitting here discussing all of this with you because all of our community are very committed to this investigative process, and it's very much that it's an investigation. It's a constant coming to the table, asking good questions, being in a state of constant reflection. These are the types of questions and topics that need to be discussed, I believe, at this time in the evolution and the unfolding landscape of plant medicine and psychedelic.
How do you see things falling apart? I'm curious to know, what your concerns are around risks, dangers, um,
Mhm.
yeah, the movement falling apart.
For me, I ultimately believe that this mission of the plants is going to be successful. I see a vision of humanity returning back to nature, back to the heart, and back to living in harmony with the earth. That is the vision that guides my work and the path that I take. That being said, I do believe that some of the decisions that we have made as a society in regards to the uh, legalization, decriminalization processes that are taking place have concerning implications because while there are legal um, steps put in place to establish certain protocols. The basis for the legal enforcement and enabling of these practices in our culture is coming from the Western society and the Western medicalization model. And so, my concern, which again, to me, it's not really a concern because I do feel that the course is going to right itself. And I feel like over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to start seeing more awareness, respect, and spaciousness created in these important discussions so that traditional wisdom keepers are going to be more heard and valued in their counsel and perspectives when it comes to how we integrate plant medicine into modern society. But because that hasn't happened to the extent that it needs to happen thus far, I do see some problematic things happening in the legislation and the ways in which we are going about incorporating plant medicines and psychedelics into modern society. Ultimately, for me, it just comes down to lack of respect for traditions that have stewarded these plants for thousands and thousands of years, because ultimately, it's the ultimate example of white supremacy, colonialism, to think that we can just pull out of our hats a medicalized model of plant medicine and psychedelics without giving sufficient honor and reverence to the traditional cultures and their extensive knowledge of these plant medicines. And so that's really the, concern that I have. But again, I do feel like we're going to see a shift take place. And we already are, with more and more wisdom keepers traveling, sharing their voices, sharing their messages, their perspectives, guiding and counseling. But that, if I was to sum it up in one word, in one phrase, I believe that there needs to be a greater merging when it comes to policy and when it comes to cultural practices that we're seeing of the introduction of plant medicine and psychedelics in the West.
I think one thing that absolutely should change much sooner than later, like now or yesterday, is this really worrying phenomena of ancestral wisdom keepers being arrested and put into jail for carrying
Mhm.
their medicines. If we're
Mhm.
going to see a legal psychedelic, therapy model, and if we're going to see expanding decriminalization of psychedelics, it would be really good to make sure that, the people that have been using these medicines as part of their culture are also being given clemency and being allowed more freedom of movement, not just doctors and psychotherapists, for example, or even, church members, like members who are like, um, yeah, just, for example, the much better organized daime churches are able to transport large amounts of medicine across international borders. But,
Mhm.
an indigenous wisdom keeper ends up being jailed, for a
Mhm.
year for carrying much smaller quantities of medicine.
Mhm.
So I'd love to see that change.
100%. I'm holding that prayer for the borders to open for this ancestral wisdom to be shared more freely and for there to be honoring of this beautiful blessing that we have with modern times that we can hop on a plane or a boat and a plane and a car and a train to be able to come from the jungle, the depths of the Amazon, and go to places like Europe or the United States or Canada to be able to share and experience this beautiful exchange of cultures. So I definitely think that 100% needs to change and praying for the consciousness of our political leaders to have that understanding flow in and really bring that shift because ultimately, it really just comes down to respect and acceptance of the fact that these traditions have been around for many, many more years than we have been playing this game of the psychedelic medicalized model. And so to just have, that humility, I believe, to will be fundamental in ensuring that the changes that we see in the years to come be something that is good and something that is worthy of the evolution of human consciousness. So, Lorna, we are coming towards the end of our show, and I wanted to just briefly get into a little bit more about the work that you're doing and the offerings that you have coming up. I know we were talking before the show of this beautiful summit that you have planned for the springtime. And I would love to just hear a little bit more about ways in which our listeners who are tuning in can work with you and your community and to learn a little bit more about ways in which the offerings that you have on your platform can support people in their studies.
Well, I would say one of the best ways to immerse yourself in intriguing expert interviews and lively panel conversations, as well as indigenous centric content, is to join the Plant Spirit Summit. So, one of my passions is the creation of short documentaries that are exploring the indigenous cultural renaissance that's been happening alongside the psychedelic renaissance. And so we've got a third documentary that's coming out. So yeah, the third one, I'm so excited. And this one is exploring the condor eagle prophecy. We were
Mm.
doing some investigation as to the origins of the condor eagle prophecy, and it seems like, as far as we're able to trace it, seems to be a prophecy that has emerged out of Ecuador. And so I think, it's my, I don't know, like my hypothesis, my theory of the psychedelic renaissance is an expression of the condor eagle prophecy, because that prophecy goes, there's going to be a time when the people of the eagle people of the north and the condor people of the south will come together, and there will be a new era of healing and peace, something like that. There's different versions of that, but basically it just speaks about this, story where, at one point, the Eagle people of the North, which had a much more, a stronger development of intellectual capacity and science, had almost wiped out the Condor people of the South, which had cultivated more the attributes of love and intuition. And, but, there was a time of, great suffering, about 500 years of great suffering. And that aligns with the, time of the conquistadors, actually, and the decimation of the indigenous populations of, the Americas. And, now we're, 500 years later, there is, a coming together of the two people. And when you look at the evolution of the psychedelic renaissance and how, these ancestral medicines are, the basis for a lot of these healing therapies, we're seeing the possibility that that, some of the, you know, most persistent um ailments and diseases that humanity is facing could actually find some relief, some healing. When you look at um the number of people around the world that are suffering from mental illness and depression, the possibility that, some of that can be alleviated through the therapeutic use of plant medicines, it's very promising. So that is the documentary that we'll be releasing in the upcoming Plant Spirit Summit, along with new interviews, new panel discussions exploring the decriminalization and legalization of psychedelics in the United States and elsewhere. And yeah, I'm so excited about that.
What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing about the work that you're doing and gracing us with your perspectives and wisdom from your time on the path. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, before we end, I always like to just offer the guests the opportunity to share final message or prayer that you want to give to our listeners and out into the world to close today's conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I would say that, you know, my prayer and my vision is for all of those people, all of you who are listening to this podcast, to remember that the medicine is inside you. And the medicine that each and every one of us have to share with each other, that's kindness.
Mm.
It can be as simple as that.
Hmm. What a beautiful reminder. Thank you, Lorna. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on this podcast.
On behalf of the Four Visions family, we want to thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this conversation and have gained seeds of wisdom that will nourish your spiritual path. If you have a moment, please leave us a review, as this helps us to reach more people. For more resources and information about the plant path, and for the highest quality spiritual tools and botanicals, please visit us at fourvisions.com. We are grateful for your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you all. Until next time.